has a formic acid base. The toxic substance for the mite in there is formic acid. Formic acid also exists in honey at higher concentrations than it is in the Mite Away Quick Strip. So if anything, the formic acid will go backwards into the Mite Away Quick Strip instead of the Mite Away Quick Strip emitting formic acid and tainting your honey. Meanwhile, the formic acid has a better benefit than the Apogard does for a couple of reasons. The genius of this setup was the gel Mite Away Quick Strip, the gel that is mixed with, and it emits the formic acid vapor. I think a little methanol evaporates off. So it's a one-way trip. It's actually a formaldehyde or formic acid ester. And then when it breaks down, it gives off formic acid and methanol and water. So all of that evaporates and makes sure that the formic acid comes up in the hive. What are the bees doing? They are making uniform the concentration of formic acid all around. Another thing is the cap for the pupating honeybee will have varroa mites in there, either growing or in the process of getting ready to lay eggs and so forth. It's permeable. Formic acid will go by that cap, go inside the cell, and get the mite and kill it. This year, my hives were sampled for viruses. I deliberately took larvae out and looked, and every single mite in the cell was dead. So that is, to me, the saving grace of Mite Away Quick Strips, because it was a 99.9 kill. Unbelievable mite kill. But the problem is this year, because we had so much of an early spring, and we had so many successive rounds of brood bearing, that mite concentrations got up and elevated, even in swarms. I counted swarms with 5% mites. Okay, now depending upon the size of the swarm, that's a lot of mites. But it's the number of mites per 100 bees that's important. So you've got a way to measure this. Next thing you know, now we've got the treatments in the past. The treatments in the past that we don't want to consider is Apistan, because it's got a chemical in there that the mites have become resistant to. The lesson with Apistan is that prolonged use of a single kind of a pesticide will select for immunity. That's not a good thing to do when we have natural chemicals. But on the other hand, what the NOD apiaries and the people that are designing this chemical and marketing Mite Away Quick Strip say, because this is a natural product, the mites are not going to evolve a immunity to it. I'm not sure I believe that, so I would recommend that you incorporate a couple of techniques to treat for mites into your protocol. Okay, that means use Apogard occasionally. Throw the mites off balance, and that way, if you got mites, fine. Now, part of the like with the hive beetle, understanding the the life cycle of the mite is also very important. There's two phases of that. So, but that's another conversation altogether. So I'm going to just skip over it and just let you know that what we want to do is, if you have not treated for mites now, you should treat. Go ahead and treat, all right? And the way I did it was, depending upon how big your hives, if you have a one hive system, use half a treatment. Use one pad, because it's really the amount of vapor per so many bees that makes the difference. And also right now the temperatures are lower, so it's going to be less tough on the larvae. Now, Stan knows that I treated my bees in the higher temperatures. The humidity was high, but also the temperature was up to 92. In the old days it said 95 on the instructions, because that's the way it is. But there's a lot of bearding when that happens. It scares the daylights out of you. Now, as the temperatures moderate with the fall coming on, what you'll see is that the bees hang into the hive a little better, and they'll circulate that formic acid well or better, and they're not outside when they should be inside getting treated. So the net result is that there'll be a better treatment. All the phoretic mites, which are also called travelers, the traveling mite, they'll get dusted right off. and that'll be the story. Now, the take-home message is when you have a prolonged season, always remember there is never one size that fits all. Remember the question, when do we feed? In the fall and in the spring. No, we don't. We feed when necessary. Well, Randy Oliver says, and I agree with a lot of things he says, because he backs it up with science. And he says that you treat for mites when you need to treat for mites. So in July, in the beginning, when the temperatures were in the 70s and 80s, you could have thrown one pad on your system without putting a dinger at all in your brood-bearing capabilities. That's another beauty of Mite Away Quick Strips. And there's a lot of people raising honey at that time. Apogard would have ruined that. And in the past, that's why I ran into trouble, because I was concerned with honey. So I never did get to treat until the tail end, and then I get messed up by the weather every time. Mite Away Quick Strips have freed me of that. So that's a benefit. So you can treat in the beginning of the summer, and then you can treat at the Varroa season. Now, when's the Varroa season? The Varroa season is when the drone population growing and growing and growing. That's when the Varroa season is, because you get mite production with drone larvae. With brood larvae, worker bees, you don't get the production of mites that you do that with the drone. And so when you get drone, that's when the hive gets overrun with mites. And the question is, why are we worried about the mites? Mites cause injury to nurse bees, the nurse bees, and the winter bees. There's a special chemical that the bees have to preserve in their body. It's their fat reserve. These fat bees are winter bees, and they must be available in the hive for the hive to make the winter. Because one thing that the hive does not pull through the winter with any capability for use is protein. So the bee evolved two mechanisms. It evolved the honey production protocol, and it stores it. And it evolved an inboard, in-body protein, glycoprotein reserve, and that's its body fat. And so that's how it makes it through the winter, and then it makes food in the winter for raising brood and for the spring, okay? So now, the reason why you want to do that, have the population of these nurse bees and winter bees available, is so that you can make it through the winter, and that's what we're going to talk about right this time.
About the mites. Are mites all the same color?
No, because some of them have a hard exoskeleton. The female mites, and the female mites are red, and the male mite has really not a hard exoskeleton. It's clear or milky white. Okay.